Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here on this thankfully rainy morning, right? And so guess what? We saved the best for last. So today we're very pleased, to welcome to our campus, again on this beautiful rainy morning, for our final Breakfast with the Expert for 2016, Mr. Thomas Watson, Executive Director of Rural Support Partners, an organization that is dedicated to improving and strengthening our rural communities through leadership development, through partnerships, and through strategic management. Thomas and his team are intimately familiar with the many challenges facing our rural communities, but they are also equally knowledgeable in how systems thinking and collaborative action models can be leveraged to improve the well-being of rural communities at all levels, at the economic level, at the societal level, and consequently and importantly for us, at the health level. So while their work is grounded in conceptual frameworks of community development, it is largely applied. So they work in the field alongside community leaders and community members in order to, again, make an impact and facilitate the forward movement of rural communities throughout our region. So we're very delighted, again, that Mr. Watson was able to take time to be with us this morning to share with us their work and their approach to community development and empowerment in the Appalachian region. Thank you for being with us, Thomas.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Oh, come on now. That was weak. Let's try it again. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right. Thank you for that warm welcome.
There's more coffee if you can.
And thank you very much for the nice introduction. That's a lot of pressure now. I didn't realize I was the last speaker of the year, so something to lead with. So again, my name is Thomas Watson, and I'm the owner and director of Rural Support Partners. And I want to do three things this morning. One, I'm going to introduce you to a pretty innovative model, innovative initiative called the Healthy Places North Carolina Initiative out of the Cape Reynolds Community Trust. And then once I get finished talking about sort of the framework there and what they're trying to do, I'm going to really bring that work to life and tell you a story about how that work is unfolding in McDowell County, right across the mountain. And then we'll talk a little bit about lessons learned, specifically around building networks and fostering collaboration for this much bigger systems and collaborative approach that we're trying to foster. So, and there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions. So we'll have time to talk with each other as well. So, first of all, just a little bit about Rural Support Partners. So we're based out of Asheville, North Carolina. We work all over Central Appalachia. In a nutshell, what we're trying to do is to help rural leaders and organizations and networks achieve better results. We focus our works on this intersection of sustainable economic development and health. And we have three big buckets of work that I would say that is currently moving forward. One is all across what I call big macro work, all across the region of Central Appalachia. And Central Appalachia, we classify as sort of Southern Ohio. These are all the sort of Appalachian counties in Southern Ohio, Eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, parts of Southwestern Virginia, East Tennessee, and then parts of North Carolina. And so in our big regional work, we do three major things. One is that we build and support regional networks. So we've helped to build and now manage the Appalachia Funders Network. It's a group of about 80 grant makers and federal agencies like the Appalachian Regional Commission who work together to actually advance what they would call the just transition of Central Appalachia. They work to promote and advance food systems, health, clean energy, natural resource restoration, and community capacity. And so they're combining their efforts, they're aligning their resources, and by doing that, they're bringing more resources into the region to push all of that kind of work forward. Same time, we manage an analogous nonprofit practitioner network called the Central Appalachian Network. Most of those folks are doing sustainable economic development work. They focus a lot on food systems, they focus a lot on clean energy, sustainable forestry, waste stream recycling, And our real goal is to find the intersections between grant makers and nonprofits. So they're actually working together as partners instead of grant makers and nonprofits, sort of power over type stuff. And so we've been very fortunate to find the intersection of those things in several places. The other thing we do is we do a lot of organizational development or management type support work to big anchor organizations. And when I say anchor organizations, I mean organizations like Appalachian Sustainable Development right here in Abington, Virginia. They're sizable nonprofits. They support a lot of small grassroots efforts, and they work in multi-county regions. So they're big. They're able to support a lot of folks and able to move sort of a regional agenda. We help those nonprofits to get better at what they do. A lot of strategic planning, strategic thinking, a lot of management support, a lot of one-on-one coaching type work. We also do that with foundations and major federal agencies like the Appalachian Regional Commission. And then we have a whole bucket of work. Our second big bucket of work is much more focused in Western North Carolina. It's all around this Healthy Places North Carolina work. I'm going to talk in depth about that, so I'm not going to go much more into it right now. But right now it's focused in getting ready to move into 3 counties. Burke County, which is Morganton, North Carolina, McDowell County, which is Marion, North Carolina, and getting ready to move into Rutherford, North Carolina as well. So I'll talk a lot about that body of work here in just a moment. The third piece of work that we do is that we're very fortunate to work with a lot of very smart and innovative folks. So we try our best to pull out the lessons and the tools and the models that are coming from all this work and try to push it out in the world. That's why I'm here this morning, right? So we try to tell anybody who will listen the kind of stuff that we're learning from this. Not to say that this is the way you got to do it, but to say this is what we're learning. Put this in your toolbox, put it into what you already know, and get better at what we're all doing, right? To lift up some rural development in some new ways. So just a little bit about the KB Reynolds Charitable Trust. It's a foundation, more or less. KB Reynolds was, so R.J. Reynolds, everybody knows R.J. Reynolds Tobacco, right? R.J. Reynolds had a brother named Will. KB was his wife. She was a tobacco magnate in herself. She came from Yancey County, North Carolina. She's a very rich woman already before she married one of the Reynolds and became a lot more wealthy. And she passed away in the mid-40s, and she left most of her fortune to improve the health of folks in North Carolina. The way foundations work is that she left the money. They invest that money. They take all the interest on that money and grant it out to folks who are doing good health work to actually improve North Carolina. Right now, they're sitting on about $900 million in assets. And so you can imagine that they're pumping out, $25, $30 million a year to actually improve health in North Carolina. So I'm here today to talk about one of the KB Reynolds Foundation's cornerstone initiatives called Healthy Places North Carolina. It's a community-based initiative that they're going to invest $100 million in over 10 years to improve the health of some of the poorest and unhealthiest counties in North Carolina. They're going to focus on about 10 or 12. I think we're in 6 or 7 right now. I'm going to let these folks here tell you a little bit more about Healthy Places. I got a little 5-minute video here. Let me see if I can get it moving. And this will bring Healthy Places.
So those of you who know foundations can already tell it's a fairly different take on foundations, right? So often foundations come into a community and say, you know, we're interested in doing X, Y, or Z, and they look for folks who are doing X, Y, and Z, and they give them grants to do it. They come back in a few years and say, what have you accomplished, right? This is almost the opposite of that, right? It's much more of what the trust would call an emergent approach, right? Which really starts with the community assets and the resources. It responds to the needs of the community. You heard the woman say, gosh, they didn't tell us what to do. They asked us what we thought we should do, and then they supported us to do it, right? Which is almost the opposite of what most foundations do, unfortunately. Encourage creativity, new thinking, and behaviors. This initiative is much more about creating new ways of thinking, new ways of working, new ways of operating than it is going after a specific health issue. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. It's about growing leaders at all levels of society, from the grassroots all the way through, all the way up through the state, and increasing the capacity of those local actors who are out there doing it every day, but rarely have the support and the capacity to do more, or even to stand back and think about what they're doing and how they can improve it. And it's engaging these unlikely partners. The work that we're doing in McDowell County, which I'll talk a lot about here in a moment, it includes the CEOs of the major factories in town, it includes the Chamber of Commerce, includes the city county managers, in addition to all the normal health players you can think about. And then this last piece is the key to all of this, is really learning and adjusting, right? Really taking the time to stop and reflect on what's working, what's not working, engaging the folks who are in the initiative
to really think with the trust and with us about that, and then do something different based on what we learned from the initiative, right? It's a pretty neat approach. You don't see it with many foundations, although most of philanthropy these days is moving in this direction. So by the time you guys get out in the field, maybe we'll have more foundations and things like this. So right now, Healthy Places is in these counties. All of these are out west. We don't work in the western part of the region. There's another organization like us who cover these counties out here. Right now, our work is in McDowell and Burke, and we're getting ready to move down to Brotherton. You can see that we're targeting the counties who are really ranked pretty poor in their health status itself, and staying away from all the others. And you can tell, most of these are urban counties, and most of all of these are rural counties, right? And so, KB Reynolds has clear ideas of what should be changing as we do this work, and it looks something like this, right? In the short term, and this is like the first year or so, we want to see folks be more energized, right? So folks have been out there, I tell you, if you ever worked in the nonprofit world and you do it on a consistent basis, it's damn hard work, and you know that, and it wears you out, man. It just wears you down, right? And so this notion that there's a bunch of money and a bunch of folks coming in to help you get done what you've been doing for a while, first thing we want to see is the re-energize. And you saw it in the video there. You saw the folks having bigger aspirations all of a sudden, having bigger visions, having more hope that things could change. That's the first step in any change effort, man. If you don't believe it and you don't see it and you don't think that something can change, nothing ever will, right? And so then it's about working together. And most folks don't work together. And it's because, the nonprofit world sets us up to be in competition with each other. I'm not going to share any of my stuff because I'm afraid you're going to steal that grant from me, so I'm going to hold it all. So we never work together. And then across sectors, from Chamber of Commerce to the hospital, they're just in completely different worlds. They don't even think about working together, right? But they have so much in common, and they have so many common goals. But nobody ever comes in and intervenes and says, boy, how could you work together? So we want to see in the first couple of years gaps in services identified in a sense of urgency to fill those gaps, right? We want to see outside partners working more closely with local actors. You heard the woman say the xenophobia sort of thing. Rural folks don't like outside people, man. They don't want outside help. They don't want people coming in to help them most of the time. And so we got to begin to open those doors up and begin to actually help folks from the outside to understand how to work better in rural communities instead of coming in and telling folks what to do. And then the last piece is really getting more leaders involved, getting folks more active, getting folks more engaged. People generally want to do something. They don't know what to do or how to do it or have an avenue to do it, right? So these are all the sort of short-term sort of stuff. And then the medium term, let's say 3 to 5 years down the road, what the trust wants to see is more creative new approaches to critical health issues. They want to see countywide thinking. Instead of thinking about my program, we want to begin to think about how my program fits with other programs that moves a countywide agenda, right? We want to begin to have services that are expanding. In McDowell County, the school just opened their gym. The damn gym has been sitting there for 50 years and it's never been opened. Now they have 3 nights a week of kids in there playing basketball and volleyball and all kinds of exercise sort of stuff going on. It was an asset that was there. Folks had never thought about, why don't we open it up to the rest of the community, right? High payoff relationships are formed when you begin to get the chamber thinking with the hospital, with the factories, with the health department. You begin to have high payoff relationships that can lead to all kinds of stuff. But then you got to have the structures in place to keep those relationships together and keep folks thinking together and working together over the long haul. Long-term success is big progress on major issues, right? It's multiple systems level efforts. And again, that's not one program. It's a bunch of programs operating as a system that actually advances more work and better work than we could ever do by ourselves. And we want multiple of those things going on. And I'll show you how that's happening here in a moment. But we want those things improving major health outcomes, right? We want to see those county health rankings change in 10 years, in 7 years. And then we want to see this collective problem solving focused on the root cause issues, right? Not surface level issues, right? We see a lot of surface level issues out there, right? You can walk out the door anywhere in Johnson City and see all kinds of health issues right in front of your face, right? We need to address those issues. But until we begin to get down to the root causes of those issues, why do they stay here? What's the entrenched issues in terms of income and poverty and lots and lots of stuff? Until we begin to make more progress on the roots, we're not going to solve a lot of the symptoms that we see. But that kind of collective problem solving and working on the root cause issues and making more progress on those really becomes the new norm in the counties, right? So those are the big outcomes that KP Reynolds is looking for. So let's talk about the roles. How does all of that roll out, right? So every foundation has program officers. Program officers generally are the ones who make recommendations on grants. The boards are generally the ones who make decisions. But the program officers in KP Reynolds operates much more like a community organizer. They come into a county. Once a county is identified, they come in, they spend about 6 months doing nothing but building relationships, understanding what's going on in the county, figuring out who's doing what, going to all kinds of meetings, and beginning to figure out who the major folks are, like you saw in the video, who could begin to take up the charge to move a bigger agenda, right? After about 6 months, they make a set of grants. They make probably 5 or 6 grants to 5 or 6 organizations across multiple sectors who they think have a role in accomplishing the kind of results that we just talked about. And then that's where we come in. So Rural Support Partners comes in as what they call the regional support organization. And our role really is to come in after the program officer and get to work in helping those leaders and organizations and networks achieve better results, right? And so in short, you know, our job is to support the development of new projects, right? You got a new idea? We'll come in and actually facilitate a planning process, help you figure out how to package that thing up, how to actually sell it back to the trust in some ways, where there's other resources you can get to actually move that kind of work forward. It's about strengthening existing programs and strategies, really helping folks to get better at their internal management systems, structures, processes, plans, strategies. You know, how do you actually deliver services in the most effective and efficient way? All this is very hands-on work, right? We're literally working with the core leaders of organizations, facilitating their thinking and reflection and planning processes as all of this stuff unfolds. Facilitating the development of shared strategies. Our job is to bring these folks together, right? We got an initial group of grantees. Let's get them together to start talking to each other about how and where their work intersects and how they might work together to move bigger agendas. And then we begin to broaden that pie out, right? And then we begin to figure out, well, who's left out of this conversation and begin to bring them into the conversation, right? And then we help grow this leadership capacity at all levels. So often leadership is really about coaching. I wouldn't put it up there because I think that's a kind of loaded term, but it's a lot of one-on-one executive support. The folks who are trying to be leaders and really sitting down and listening to them and working with them. I'm a social worker by trade, so we do a lot of one-on-one therapy, more or less. But we also help folks to identify their own values, right? I mean, what is leadership, right? Leadership is really having very good clarity on your values and a reflective process that helps you understand how you're carrying out those values on a daily basis in your work, right? Management's a very different thing. Management's about getting things done. Leadership's about how you go about getting things done, right? You can be a great manager and a poor leader. You can be a great leader and a poor manager, right? And so it takes all of those things, and our job is to really help folks to think about that stuff, right? And so often no one is ever asking anybody to think about that stuff. So those are a lot of the roles that we play in this process. We're literally hands-on every day. One of your colleagues, Carter Florence, is in Burke County this morning doing this stuff, right? She's the director of this working out of our office, and she's literally in the community almost every day, hands-on with folks trying to get this kind of stuff done. Last thing I'd say about RSP's work is that, you know, it's our values and beliefs that makes all of this work. We have a big list of them. You can see a lot of them on our website because we work with a lot of folks, and we got to do it in the right way. We could do all the things that you just saw, and if we didn't do it in the right way, it wouldn't make a heck of anything, right? And so when we walked into McDowell County, the one thing you have to recognize as a community organizer is that there's always been 100 people before you who's tried to do what you're doing, and 98 of them have screwed it up. And most people are suspicious of you and have already a bad thinking about what you're going to do, especially coming from Asheville, you know, the city, down to a rural county. Most folks think that you're there to tell them what to do, right? And that you're going to look down on them and think you're smarter than them, right? So we wrote all this stuff up, the things you just saw there, and then we put these values out. We're here as your partner, man. We're not here. We're going to roll up our sleeves and get to work with you, right? We have as much of a stake in the health of this county as you do, although we're outsiders and we'll never be a leader in this county. But we're here as your partner, and we're going to help you get things done. Two is that we believe in the folks in the county. We wake up and think about this every day, but our job is to believe in the people in McDowell County. I mean, those are the folks who understand the issues. They're the ones who know how to fix those issues. What they generally lack are the support, the resources, and sometimes the confidence to get that stuff done. Right? And then the last thing is that we're not here to tell you what to do, and we're very clear about that. We do this for a living, so we think about it a lot. We've got lots of ideas, lots of models, lots of examples, but at the end of the day, it's your choice of what you do. And so those values and beliefs are critical to the underpinning of the work. Those are the three most important ones that we thought folks needed to hear from us in Burke County and McDowell County. And we keep those on the table, and we say if you ever see us do anything besides that, then you better call us on it, because our work will not be successful without those values underlying what we do. So that's Healthy Places in a nutshell, right? A lot more pieces to it, but that's basically what it is. 10-year, $100 million initiative. Lots of money coming from grants, as the work and the projects begin to come, KB Reynolds puts more money into the projects. We continue to do what we're doing, help folks achieve better results. And so now I want to talk about McDowell County. So McDowell County is about 45 minutes south of Asheville. And McDowell County is a historical manufacturing town. It's a very rural place, got some absolute beautiful Limble Falls and some things in the county. Got a big lake, James, and so there's a kind of a rich side around the lake, and then everybody else is fairly low income, hardworking, working class folks. Very poor health outcomes in the county itself, and a heck of a lot of folks who want to change that, right? So here's the situation. We walked into McDowell County about a year and a half ago, and Healthy Places had been going on about a year and a half before we got there, right? It was one of the first counties that KB Reynolds identified as a Healthy Places county. And just quite frankly, they had screwed up. I don't know what else to say about it. Everybody was pissed off. The trust was pissed off. Everybody in McDowell County was pissed off. The program officer came in, made that initial set of grants, as I was talking about, and then nobody followed them. They didn't have us in place. They didn't have the support organization there. So literally folks in McDowell County were left on their own to try to figure this out. And they had been in the process of other foundations who had told them what to do so much, they literally didn't know what to do, right? And the trust was sitting there thinking, my God, nobody's doing anything, right? And so the trust was just about to give up on McDowell County. They thought, man, nothing's going to happen here. And the folks in McDowell County felt like they had been cheated out of their money and out of the support that the trust had promised them, right? And so here we walk into the community. And so here's the 5 things that we had on our list to do, right? First one was really just uncover what in the world is going on here. Pull out that existing knowledge, right? And so we identified 30 of the major leaders in this effort. They had kind of self-organized into this loose-knit coalition, health coalition. And those leaders are all across the board. Some of them are very grassroots, all the way down to the mayor. And we literally spent 2 months just talking to those folks. And we sat down, we had lunch, we had coffee, we had whatever we could have with folks. And we asked 3 central questions. We said, what do you think is going well with this Healthy Places thing? What do you think is not going so well? And what do you think needs to be done next? And so all throughout those interviews, we were collecting that data, right? That's participatory research at its finest, right? And we were collecting all of that data, and we were bringing it back, and we were looking for the patterns, right? Somebody said something more than twice, that was a pattern for us, right? They said it more than 3 times, that was like moving on up the scale. And so we just kept codifying what we heard from folks every time we talked to folks, right? And so once we got finished with those first 30, in its simplest form, what was going on there is that the county was literally sitting there waiting on the trust to tell them what to do next. They had no idea what to do. No one, foundations, had never offered them the opportunity to think for themselves, frankly. And they didn't know what to do with it. Most nonprofits churn out grants left and right, and they churn them out based on what the foundation wants. Foundation's pretty fuzzy on this. They're like, what do you want, right? And so literally folks in McDowell County didn't know what to do. And they were sitting there waiting on the foundation to tell them what to do next. The foundation, on the other hand, was sitting there waiting on the county to tell them what they wanted to do, right? And that relationship got pretty brittle in the middle of that, right? Both sides were pissed off at each other, and nobody and nothing was moving forward. And so we wrote all that up, right? We wrote up the things that we heard, and we said, here's the simplest thing that we can tell you. And folks in McDowell County, you got to start figuring out what you want to do, and you got to begin to see the trust as a partner, not a grantor, right? because the trust wanted to be a partner. They didn't want to just fund money. They really wanted to help think, create innovation, and put some money on the table all at the same time. And then the next thing we did is that we literally mapped out all the players, right? So those 30 first interviews, we also discovered probably 25 more people who were really important to the health and well-being of McDowell County at all levels. And we literally spent a day, put a big piece of paper on the wall, and literally mapped them out. Put everybody that we saw up on the wall, right? And what they were in charge of. And so as we began to look at that, we saw very clearly that there were 4 big systems represented among those 50 people, right? They represented 4 big systems almost to a T. Every one of them could fit into 4 systems. Right? They had organized themselves into a coalition that had 9 working groups, right? And those 9 working groups were all around critical health issues, all the way from teen pregnancy to healthy eating. And those 9 working groups were doing nothing. They were meeting all the time, and people were burnt out from meeting all the time, but they had no traction. They couldn't figure out what to do. They couldn't figure out how to work together because nobody was there helping them to figure out how to work together, right? Working together is a whole new job, right? If I got a job as a nonprofit, I'm focused on my job. If I'm thinking about how we work together, somebody's got to be out here helping to facilitate that conversation so that we begin to find intersections between our work so that we can begin to align, coordinate, and then collaborate in bigger ways. But since nobody was doing that, they were meeting for the hell of meeting, and they were doing it a lot, and everybody was burnt out with it, right? And they were getting nothing done. And the trust didn't like it either because they felt like it was just that they had set up this structure only to funnel money, and they weren't doing anything innovative with it, right? And so we then added some new information, right? We then took what we know, and we said, gosh, y'all, it seems like, one, we're hearing from you, you're awfully burnt out, you're doing all these meetings and not getting anything out of it. You're running all over the place. And what we see is that you have 4 big systems that if you begin to restructure yourselves and organize yourself in these systems, it would seem to us that you could get a hell of a lot more done, right? And those systems that were already at the table was the behavioral health. Lots of folks in there doing something related to behavioral health, from kids all the way to seniors, but there are various pieces in there. It's just, everything from substance abuse folks all the way down to, mental health work with kids and families, mental health work with seniors, so on and so forth. But there was a good 10 or so folks doing behavioral health work, right? They weren't talking to each other. They weren't working together. They were scattered out amongst those 9 working groups, right? And then a bunch of clinical care folks, health department, hospitals, mobile van, mobile dental clinic, all kinds of clinical pieces of a system. But again, they weren't working together. The food system, they had cooperative extension. They had churches who were doing food pantries. They had nutrition programs. They had the farmers market. But they weren't thinking together. They were scattered out amongst these 9 groups, right? And then the built environment, they had the town planner, they had the city county manager, they had the department of the COG, the Council of Government, who does transportation and so on and so forth. They were all scattered through these 9 things. And so we said, look, what if you got into these groups, into these systems, and you began to think together about how to make this system more efficient and effective, right? And so, so they gave us the benefit of the doubt, and they began to hold meetings in systems, right? And so the first meeting was the food system. And let me play this one out. I'm not going to play them all out, but I'll play this one out. So the food system. So think about this a second. We had cooperative extension. We had nutrition folks from the school and out of cooperative extension as well, 4-H type people. We had a couple of food pantries. We had the farmers market. We had a couple of farmers, and we had a couple of restaurants who were buying local food, right? So all of those folks are part of a food system, right? And if you think about the pieces and parts, what they represent markets, they represent producers, farmers, they represent food security, they represent nutrition. And so what we did is we literally came into that meeting and we had to map out the system. So we put all those parts up there, and then we said, who fits in those parts, right? So who's behind the parts? How many farmers do you have here? How many can you list, right? How many food pantries do you have in this county? How many of them can you list? How many folks are doing nutrition work in this county? And we put it all up on the wall, right? So you can see the whole food system, right? Everybody in that county who was doing something related to local foods. And then we said, well, gosh, how are those folks connected to each other? And they weren't, We literally put it up on a sheet of paper and said, now draw a line, tell us how they're connected. And they generally were not connected, right? Even the farmers to the farmers market were not connected, right? They were showing up, but they really had no deep relationship, nor were they working together, nor were they thinking about how to grow production of food in that county, right? And so, and then we saw that there were 15 food pantries in McDowell County. Very small county, right? 15 food pantries. There were 2 food pantry women in the audience. I said, how do you work with these folks? We don't. I said, do you know them? She said, yeah, I know them. I said, you don't ever talk to them? She said, well, I talk to them as friends, but I don't ever talk to them about our work. And so in that first meeting, we said, my God, we got 15 food pantries. Why don't our next meeting bring those food pantries together and begin to get them to talk to each other, right? And so the next meeting, we got 15 food pantries together. Some church, some at the school, so on and so forth. Within 30 minutes of that meeting, we figured out that all 15 of those food pantries were driving an hour each way, an hour up and an hour back to Asheville every week to pick up food at Manna Food Bank. Right? 15 trips times 2, right, in small volunteer organizations. And so I said, well, gosh, what if you made 1 trip instead of 15? And they said, well, that'd be good, but what if we had an aggregation hub here where we could actually store food and Manna would come to us and we wouldn't have to make any trips to Asheville? And everybody said, my God, that would be really helpful, right? Because they're all small, they didn't have any place to store anything, so that's why they were going up and back all the time, right? And if you've got an aggregation hub, Manna will actually come and drop off food, and people like Walmart will donate a lot more food, right? And so we thought, my God, that's a great idea. Right? So all of a sudden, you began to see this more systems approach unfold. You got 15 food pantries, been in this county forever, never talked to each other, and now all of a sudden they've got a vision for how they can be more efficient and more effective in what they're doing. I literally walked out of that meeting, and I walked into the first built environment meeting, and the planner for the town was there. I told her about that, and she said, my God, I got 4 buildings empty in the city right now that could serve as an aggregation hub. Let's get to work. And so the next phase was KB Reynolds gave that group $20,000. They have now hired a person to do a feasibility study on those buildings to see which one works the best as an aggregation hub. The rest of this food system said, my God, if you're going to do that, then we want the other side of it for farmers, right? Because small farmers can't play in big markets unless they pull their food, unless they aggregate it, right? And so half of this, the vision now is that half of this center is going to be used to store food that's going to go to the food pantry. The other half of it's going to be used to help farmers to access bigger markets by aggregating the food from a bunch of small farmers who said, hell yeah, we'd like to do that. And so $20,000 came to the group who's now hired somebody who knows how to do those food hubs and doing a business plan for it, right? The city's already agreed that any one of those buildings will rent it out to you for $1 a year. If you can use it, take it, right? And so all of this was here, right? But no one had ever brought those folks together to think as a system, to think together about how they might work together to become more efficient and effective in what they're doing. Once you begin to get folks organized in one system, then it's really easy to figure out how they can interact with other systems, right? The food pantry folks would have never, in 100 years, come in contact with the planner of the town. They didn't know who the hell she was. They had no idea. They haven't had a plan, right? And so, and neither would we. We wouldn't have thought about that either. But because we got organized as systems, we were both able to be more efficient and effective here, and we were able to interact with other systems in much deeper ways, right? That's just one small thing. The community clinical care, they have now organized themselves, knitted together a whole system to support folks who are uninsured. They have a data collection system now. They can actually share information with each other. They understand you can walk into any of 15 different clinical care organizations if you're uninsured and say, I need X, Y, and Z. And they have a whole system that they can shoot you in the right direction, right? All of those were there. They had just never thought together as a system of how they could be more efficient and effective in serving populations that they had a hard time serving. Right? And so the first step of all of our work was to get the systems organized, right? Same thing in behavioral health, and there's more systems, I'm sure, but these are the ones we've been focusing on. So right now, each one of these systems has a group, probably 15 or so, that represents each one of these systems, thinking together about how to be more efficient and effective as a system itself. They all did this mapping exercise I was talking about. They all saw where their systems were connected, disconnected, how they were working together, how they weren't working together, and they all got some big ideas of what they might do together to help each one of them to do their jobs better, right? So all of that works rapidly moving forward, and you can see once projects begin to pop up, then KB Reynolds comes back in with some money and says, heck yeah, that's what we want to do, and they support the money. Never been in a situation like this, right? I've been a community organizer for 20 years. I've never had money behind the organizing, right? So it's a wonderful opportunity. But it's not enough, right? Having systems organized is good, but it still ain't enough, right? So, so at the same time, the Chamber of Commerce was really concerned about health in the workplace. And so KB Reynolds funded a study out of Chapel Hill, a public school, the public health school at Chapel Hill came up, and they did a study of all the workplaces. They have several major manufacturers there, big manufacturers. And what they did is they surveyed all the factories, they looked at all the health issues, they talked to all the folks in the factories, what would you be willing to do, how would you be willing to do it, how's health affecting your employees, this kind of stuff. They came out with some recommendations, and we thought, my God, that's a great idea, right? Because rural folks don't go to the doctor, man. You know, my papa died of an aortic aneurysm. It must have ruptured sometime in the middle of the night. He got up the next morning sick as he could be. Did he go to the doctor? No. He went out and mowed the yard, right? Collapsed in the yard, mowing the damn yard with an aortic aneurysm in his belly, right? That's generally how rural folks roll, right? They're not going to leave the factory at 5 o'clock and go to the doctor. So we got to thinking, man, if this could work in the workplace, what about taking it out to the churches and the schools and these big institutions? So it's about taking services to where people are already located, where they're already organized, and not expecting them to go out and get the services, right? So when you get systems organized, that's fairly easy, right? So one of the food pantries here said, oh my God, they work at a church, a very rural church, very hard to reach rural folks. He said, I got 150 people comes to my place every week to pick up food. Bring that damn health van out here, right? And so now there's a health van sitting there with 150 people every week who can get access to preventive care. They're serving 50 or so folks a week in a health van because they took it out to the food pantry, right? And the only reason that happened is because the food pantries got organized and they began to think about how can we begin to interact with these other places and how can we do more than just serve people food, right? All of the workplaces now, there's a whole, KB Reynolds funded a staff person to work with all the factories. And so now all the factories are creating literally their own menu of the services that they need in the factory. And because we're organized, it's fairly easy to come back and say, hey, you know what we need is we need the dental van over at Bald to work next Tuesday. Can you do it? And the clinical folks will say, heck yeah, we can do it. That's what they want. They want opportunities to interact with folks where they are. But nobody's ever gone out and actually created the opportunity for that to happen, right? So again, nothing new here. All these things were all in place before any of this started happening. But what KB Reynolds has offered this community the opportunity to get organized, right? And so once you get the systems organized, it's very easy to go out and begin to work in other systems that are already organized. The schools, there's a whole peer-led youth high school movement now. Built out a bunch of youth leaders, trained them on how to do surveys and focus groups, and they're surveying all their peers right now. They did a whole day of listening a couple of Saturdays ago. We invited all the high school kids to the high school, split up into all the rooms, and all the kids led focus groups on what are your health needs? How would you access that health? What would you like to talk about that you don't ever talk about? And so all of that's being written up right now that then goes back to the clinical care. That goes back to the built environment. You know, we need a trail that connects us from X to Y because I would walk to school if I had that kind of stuff, right? But the opportunity is that those kids are learning how to do the work in addition to informing all this stuff, right? But it's still not enough, right? There's always going to be populations that are going to be left out of anything that we're talked about up here. And so the third piece of our work here is organizing communities that have historically been left out of just about everything in the whole county, right? West Marion is a historical African-American community and wasn't organized at all. We were very fortunate. There's a couple of leaders from that community that were involved in the bigger stuff. We said, well, gosh, why don't we hold a couple of big meetings here in the community, and let's see what's going on and see what folks' needs are. Well, we held one big meeting. We had 45 people show up, right? And they said, you know, what our issues are is transportation, housing, childcare, and healthy eating. That's what we care about. And so once those folks got clear on what their issues were, we went back to the systems and we said, hey, who's doing healthy eating in here? Could you come to the next West Marion meeting? So then the service folks come to West Marion, instead of West Marion going after them, and said, you know, here's what's going on in the food system world. Here's what we've been doing. Here's what's happening in the rest of the county. What would you like to see in your county? Right? And the first thing they said is, boy, we want a community garden. And we got the church right here. Church donated land. The food system folks have come over. They've already broken ground. They're building a fence right now. They're going to turn the healthy eating out of the garden into a community kitchen, into the church itself. Right? And so all of that's happened in like 8 months. Right? And it's because the community got organized and they got clear on what they wanted. And then because we had the systems organized, we were able to go out and say, hey, who's doing this? Bring them over, right? And they were excited to work in West Marion, but they never had any opportunities or opening there. And the folks in the community always felt like they were recipients instead of drivers of services. So now they're the drivers, right? And so now they're working on the community garden that has led the church to expand its kitchen, who's going to then do nutrition classes and cooking classes in the kitchen itself to begin to build out the whole thing, right? Their housing needs prompted this group of folks to now build a housing coalition. That brought folks from all over the state together because the housing issues in Marion and West Marion are so poor that they didn't have enough local resources to do anything about it. So they said, and they don't have any housing plans or anything like that. And so now they're working to build a housing coalition that would be capable of funding federal money and state money and KP Reynolds money into McDowell County to do home repairs and other things. At the same time, the community's taken up their own leadership. They built 2 ramps themselves, right? They built 2 ramps already because they had one housing guy here, works with a bunch of prison reentry guys. He says, look, if y'all want to help yourself, I'll bring some guys over to help you. I know how to do this. But you got to bring 10 people to the table as well. So West Marion is not only helping themselves, right, which they've got to do because the services are never going to meet all the needs, but they also have set themselves up and organized themselves as partners with these bigger systems who now are at the table with them to begin to figure out how they can do a better job of working in West Marion. Same thing's got to happen in the Latino community. Very difficult to organize in the Latino community these days. The youth community, we've already got the youth organized at the high school, but that needs to go out itself. And there's this rural white population that's so rural and out there. The churches are the way to organize them, right? And we're beginning to figure out how to do some of that. So you can see what's happened here by getting systems organized, the folks in the system organized, we begin to have better interactions with where people already are. Right? It's about being efficient and effective in the system, but it's also about being able to take those services out to the places where people are. Right? And then we always know that we got to do a better job of organizing people who have been historically left behind so that they have the power to shape some of these systems, so that they can help their own selves, and so that they actually have a structure in place that can allow those systems to begin to come in and be more effective and efficient in serving the populations that have never been served very well. So there's your systems approach to public health, right? It's a combination of organizing, it's a combination of public health, and luckily, it's a combination of philanthropy, right? Which has made all this successful. So last thing I want to talk about is what's made it successful, right? So the whole point is get folks to work together. I mean, if you take anything from this thing, that's the most important thing, is that we got to work together to solve these deeper, bigger issues. There's no way that any one organization or even a collection of organizations by themselves are going to make any significant progress on the health issues in McDowell County. And there's a whole continuum, we call them the 4 C's, communication. Hell, if you can do nothing else, get people talking to each other, right? And that's where it starts. Just get folks talking. Think about the pantries. They knew each other. God, they went to church with each other, but they never really talked to each other. And as soon as they talked to each other, they found clear ways to begin to coordinate what they were doing. Not doing anything new, but just beginning to figure out, gosh, we're making 15 trips to Asheville, why don't we make 1? Well, gosh, now they got to think about that. Well, gosh, why don't we get them to come to us, right? And so you begin to see the thinking, right? It's about thinking differently, acting differently, right? Collaboration means that you're really rolling up your sleeves and doing some major stuff together, right? It's much harder to process. And then collective impact, you're really doing some major stuff, right? But the key is that the more you can move toward this, the more likely you are to get at some of these entrenched root issues, the things that continuously hold us back, right? And in McDowell County, they've identified that as access to living wage jobs. They've identified those root causes as a pathway for folks, like where do you go and what do you do when you leave high school? And if you didn't get there out of high school, what in the hell do you do now, right? They've identified that as lack of mentors and lack of family connections in the county itself. And they've identified that, I got one more, what is the last one? I can't remember the last one, but you get it, right? It's those really deep entrenched issues that nobody can solve on their own. And so here's what makes networks work, the sort of 10 building blocks that we've learned over the years. Trust and relationships are the key, man. Relationships and trust are very different though, right? Relationships you get by hanging out, having coffee. Trust you gain by actually working together and being accountable to each other. It's much harder to form, but once you form trust, then you can do almost anything. I've got a little sign on my computer that says change moves at the speed of trust, and it's the key. All of these other things, a shared analysis, most of the folks that are involved in all this are on the same page about the root cause problems of health in their county. They have a vision for what they're trying to do, and they have a common identity of improving the health of their community, right? Those are the things that bonds folks together. Then you got to get to work. You got to have some goals. You got to have some work that you're doing in common, and you got to have some measurement there to see if you're actually making progress, right? Measurement needs to be fairly simple in the first start. You need to actually count everything you can as success. And then you got to have somebody managing these things, right? Collaboration is a different thing. It's not, you can't expect 4 organizations to come together and begin to collaborate. That's a different piece of work, right? So somebody's got to be helping that collaboration to do these things and supporting them as they go. Clear benefits for local folks. It goes back to the measurement piece. When you're working together, people have to see benefits on the ground. They have to see things change in the community to stay together and to hang together, because collaboration is hard. Shared power and control. That's part of the network management, is that you got to be this balanced organization, a balanced person that helps everybody have this same and equal power. Nobody can control the networks, the collaborative work. It has to be a collective thing. People have to feel it, and they have to own it together. And if one person begins to take control of it, like the health working group, then you see that things go down the tubes pretty quick. Consistent communication. Man, you don't have to meet all the time, but boy, you got to keep people talking all the time, right? And you got to keep that through the internet, through any way you can, just to keep folks talking together. You got to have enough structure, but not too much. Structure is only to move the strategy. I see a lot of folks come in, they'll start, president, treasurer, blah. You only put structure in a network to actually move the work that's moving forward. If you put too much structure on it, you spend all your time working on structure, it gets too heavy and it collapses pretty quick, right? So structure emerges out of the work, not before the work, right? And so mutual accountability, you got to be clear on that from the beginning. How are we going to hold each other accountable? What happens when Kate doesn't do her job? What are we going to say to Kate, right? And it's not about reprimanding Kate. It's about, hey, how can we help you get it done? I've noticed that you got a lot on your plate these days, right? And then the last thing is clear benefits for the member organizations. If folks don't get something out of the collaboration and out of the network fairly quick, they're going to leave. And so you don't start collaborations by tackling the hardest thing. You start by figuring out where's the alignment of what we're already doing. Like the food pantries, right? Their first initial thing was, we're making 15 trips. Could we make one? That helps me. It helps me tomorrow, right? That's what you got to look for, right? If you start tackling the biggest problem to start with, you just spend all your time trying to figure out how to tackle the biggest problem. If you can begin to align your existing work, and that may be as simple as you're doing a training and I'm doing a training, well, let's do a joint training together. Or let's put a flyer together that says, advertises them both. Anything that helps the organization to be more efficient and effective. Simple, easy things to begin with. And then you build that trust, and then you go and you tackle bigger, more complex things as your analysis unfolds and as your vision gets better. Right? So that's it for me. That's the story. And so, there you go.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Yeah, we do have, a little bit of time, for questions, answers, and folks in HSMP 5500, after this, you have absolutely no reason not to ace the final. Okay? Because this was the best review ever before next week's final exam. Okay? So some questions, comments, thoughts. I
have a comment. It was just very informative and I learned a lot, which was good. But no questions.
Okay. Did you base the selection of the counties that you're working with purely off of the health rankings, or did you use any other criteria?
Very good question. I think there were three big things actually. And KP Reynolds makes these choices, but they involve us in. One is that it had to be, on the poor end of health, right? So that was the biggest criteria. Two is that they had to be sizable enough to make a difference. They won't work in very small counties, right? Population matters. So I think they're looking at it's 30 or 40,000 people that has to be in the county, or they don't feel it's worth their time, to be honest with you. And then three is that there is some semblance of leaders there that they think are open to this kind of thinking. And so those are the three biggest criteria that we use to actually select those counties.
And so are they planning to expand into additional counties with time?
Yeah, so the initiative is about its 4-year mark right now. They're going to, over the next 6 to 8, 10 years or so, they hope to have 10 to 12 counties in the thing. So there's 6, 7 counties right now, so they'll expand probably 5 or 6 more counties as we go.
So you said Carter's in Burke County right now. Is she, are you all starting this process where you've gone through in McDowell now in Burke? So
Yeah.
do you feel like that going through this, was this a big learning process for you? Obviously you came in with some skills and understanding of network success and so forth, but.
Each county is a little bit different. Burke County, we have done a little bit of the opposite. We've worked a lot closer with the program officer. They have a new program officer. In McDowell County, obviously, they had the wrong program officer doing the work when we walked in there. She had created quite a bit of difficulties herself, so we kind of distanced ourselves from her, to be quite frank about it. Because our job is to be this real balanced player, to hold the interest of the trust, and hold the interest of the community, and try to find the right middle path between the two. And so we needed to make that very clear in McDowell County by showing up independently. In Burke County, we didn't need to do that. And it's a much more politically charged county. People do not work together. They're not interested in working together. Everything's political. There's all kinds of gatekeepers there. And so literally Carter has been out doing those one-on-ones, but she's been doing it mainly with the program officer. And because it's an easier in, and folks are more open to it, actually. And so she did about 3 or 4 months of that, and now she's beginning to establish her own work. And this morning she has a group. There's a group of folks who are doing homeless work, and they've never talked to each other. They've never worked together, and so she's doing the same process with those. She met, some of those folks through the one-on-ones, and they said, well, gosh, we don't know what to do, and don't know anybody else is doing it. So this morning they're having their first meeting, just literally to talk about what everybody's doing, what they're really struggling with, how they might begin to work together and some things. And so it does look a little bit different, but the same ideas and the same core concepts, I think, take hold. It's just that initial assessment of what's needed at the time. In McDowell County, we needed to be independent. In Burke County, it just made a lot more sense for us to be much more connected to the trust. So, but same process otherwise.
Are any of these initiatives far enough along to see what happens whenever the foundation starts to shift their assets to other communities and they're kind of left to spend for themselves?
Very good question. They're not, and we're thinking about that already. And part of what we've asked the trust to do, and they're willing to do, is to organize the other foundations who are supporting work in these communities, right? Because there is, and we've already done this assessment, there's 8 or 9 other foundations and state agencies who are funding health-based work in McDowell County. What we've asked the trust to do is to pull those people together and begin to have a longer-term commitment and a vision of how funding is going to continue to happen in these counties long after we're gone, right? And so it's one of the big worries for us is that you get relying on $10 billion coming into your county and then all of a sudden it's gone. And so we've got to begin to do some additional organizing of other philanthropies to have a longer term vision. The trust is wanting everybody else in the county to work together. And what we've said and pushed back to them on is, why don't you get the foundation world organized in the same way that we're trying to get folks in the counties organized, so that we actually have a long-term vision for supporting the work in these counties. We'll see how that goes. The Appalachia Funders Network has been a great example of that. Those folks have very long-term visions. They're aligning their resources and figuring out like who can support this phase of things, who can support that phase of things, who can support the long-term phase of things. We hope a similar effort happens in North Carolina. It's yet to be seen. And your question is right on. You got to start thinking about the exit as soon as you enter, right? Because if you don't, everybody's going to just crash at the very end of this thing. So.
Sort of around the same lines of the foundation, you mentioned, and I think a few of us who've worked with foundations see this as really different model. So what allowed, or what characteristics of KB Reynolds allows it to kind of split and allow the communities to take the lead? And is there anything that other foundations can learn from kind of their model or their culture?
So the first 50 years of KB Reynolds, their work was primarily literally handing money to health centers and hospitals. It was almost a guaranteed pot of money for a select few hospitals and health departments across the state. They had an old boy, white boy guy running the thing who literally, that's all he did. And what changed is that Karen, the director, stepped in, and Alan Smart stepped in, and they said, we're going to do something different. And here's where we are. And leadership means everything. And the vision of the folks who are running foundations means everything. The old guy who ran it for 50 years, it was about him and his relationships and his ability to funnel money to old boys in his network. And when that stopped, innovation began to happen. And so Alan had been working in Louisiana in very rural communities, doing very innovative work, running another foundation. And Karen's just a forward-thinking woman. She's actually now left the foundation and is heading up the Colorado Trust, which is the largest health foundation in the United States these days. And so we're hoping, and this is part of the process, is that this is a model for health foundations. And they see it that way. There's been a couple of articles published already around this initiative. So they've really put themselves out and taken up their leadership, and they're really prompting other folks to do the same. Robert Wood Johnson's getting ready to hire a program officer in Appalachia. Alan is on their rural management team, advisory team, and so I believe their work is going to begin to look much like this in broader central Appalachia. So that's how change happens. Somebody's got to begin to have some innovation and take up their leadership to do some new things, and you got to prove that it works, and then other folks will follow. Or that's the hope.
Just to, I guess, follow up on Nathan's question. So you work, with the community leaders and members to identify, again, what they want done and how to move forward. As part of this sustainability work, can you engage those same people in similar discussion? What do they think can be done to sustain this initiative in the long term? What kind of activities, what kinds of initiatives can happen today that can be maintained over time?
So I see that as our job, right? Our job is not to set people up to give KB Reynolds money. Our job is to set people up to do that, right? So that they're strong and they're clear and they're efficient in their own internal workings, so that they, I've learned this term just recently, so that they have adaptive capacity, so that they can actually begin to adapt and be resilient in whatever situation that comes their way, and really help them think about how not to get top-heavy. Because one of the things I worry about is RSP. Every time we move into a new county, I get money for a new staff person, right? And so I'm very concerned about, and I've seen this happen. I've been in these initiatives in all kinds of ways. Just finished one with the Ford Foundation recently, and what happens is that these foundations will take advantage of you, man. And for me, as a small business, we're a for-profit business. We're a social enterprise. We're a for-profit management structure. And we have, and obviously a nonprofit mission and vision and set of values and an agenda to move. But, I could set myself up to have 5 or 6 staff by the time this thing ended, which I could never sustain without KB Reynolds there, right? And so, I'm saying the same thing to everybody else. And I'll give you a great example. So the workplace wellness, so it was funded, right? They funded a guy who's working out of the Chamber of Commerce to do this workplace wellness stuff. He's beginning to figure out services that all of the factories want. They had a vision of setting this up as a nonprofit, right? They're going to be, let's take this as half the chamber and set it up as a nonprofit. Let's keep doing these services. And I said, do you really think that's sustainable? And they said, well, no, I don't think it's sustainable. And I said, well, do you think the factories would actually pay for some of the services that you're talking about? And I said, sure, I think they would. And so we're doing a lean canvas business planning session with that group and the board of the chamber next week to really think about how that effort becomes a social enterprise as opposed to a nonprofit always seeking grants. So that thing over time should generate money because we can prove that a healthy employee or an unhealthy employee costs an employer, gosh, y'all know the answer to this, what does it cost a year? It's like $8,000 or something a year, right? So we're not asking factories to even pay anything, we're asking them to give us half that savings, right? If we can keep somebody out of the hospital and keep them healthy and working all year, then you've just saved $8,000. So why don't you give us $4,000 of that, right, of your savings to help support this over the long term, right? So the thinking of sustainability and resilience is more sort of what's in my mind. It has to be at the forefront of all this stuff. And so finding new structural models of these hybrids of for-profits and nonprofits, really thinking with folks about how to maximize what they're doing now without getting too top-heavy in this initiative itself. And you do that by working together instead of me hiring 6 more staff. I'm going to work with you to do bigger work together. It's the constant march of our work and everything we do. And that doesn't change in all of our work at Central Athletics. It's the same thing. Because you can't just keep chasing grants after grants after grants. Yes.
What do you think is the potential for interested community stakeholders in the counties that don't qualify due to population, or if they don't qualify like by a narrow margin, something like that, to connect with your program and figure out how to organize their services?
Well, it's a great question, and I got 2 answers to that. One is that, we know that the kind of stuff we're doing, you can't just solve county by county, right? And so even in McDowell County, they're part of a larger 3-county health department district. It's also their council of government district. And so 2 of those counties are going to be Healthy Places County, and one of them's not, right? And so we've already said to the trust to say, look, let's take substance abuse. Folks aren't just doing heroin in McDowell County. They're getting it from Burke County, they're getting it from Rutherford County, they're getting, and it's going across the borders. And so a lot of this stuff has to begin to get up and be multi-county type work. And so our hope is that we can begin to lift up multi-county work that KB Reynolds can begin to funnel into because they see it going into McDowell County, but it also supports the counties over, right? And so a lot of the behavioral health work is already, we're actually working with that group now to map out all the substance abuse services in all that 3-county areas. One of those is not a Healthy Places County, right? But we know that if they don't work together in their health district, if they don't work together in their COG, in their political district, then over time they're never going to be able to do the resources and knit together the services that are needed to actually tackle substance abuse issues. And so that's one way that we're getting at it. And then they've done something that they're testing right now down east. You notice one of these was, I can't remember, it was Halifax and something else. It's like a sister county. They don't get all the benefits, but they get some of the benefits, and they're lumped together with one of the Healthy Places County, right? It's kind of they have a name for it, I can't remember what it is now, but it's like a partner county, right? Because they said, look, our services go back and forth so much, we just can't do this by ourselves. And so they didn't give them full benefits, but they said, well, let's tag it together and we'll work together, and they're trying it out. And so we'll see what happens. And so my hope is we can both funnel money to other counties through collaborative work, multi-county collaborative work, and we got this little pilot project going on in the east that will actually bring a sister county along with them, and we'll see how that goes.
So I think we are out of time. I actually had a question, but I'm going to save it for after we, again, thank you one more time. And folks, if you have any questions or if you'd like to talk, with Mr. Watson one-on-one, we will be in the student lounge right here, so that the next class can come in issue 116. So let's please, prepare the room for the next
It's pretty cool. It's basically Brett.
And they have a donated care network and so forth. But they're having one person kind of like bash it around. Yeah. You know, I don't know. It's very like.